top of mind right now is, I think, one really important thing is the ICP focus, so ideal customer profile. I think a lot of companies probably, as they should early on, it's about, okay, let's get some revenue in, focus on the top line so we can grow the company, show traction, and raise our next funding round or whatever it is. And then when do you switch from that to, again, getting revenue in? That's nice, but for a company like ours, it's about getting the right customers in.
Welcome to Revenue Insights. Every week, we'll be joined by revenue leaders from some of the most successful and highest growing companies. Together, we explore how they built their revenue teams, the journeys that they've been on, and the lessons they have learned along the way. Revenue Insights is brought to you by Ebster. We're a revenue intelligence platform designed to help revenue teams to build more pipeline, close more deals, and retain more customers. Hello, and welcome to the Revenue Insights podcast. Today, I'm joined by Emil Dyrvig. He is the Chief Revenue Officer of Templafy. Emil started his career over at L'Oreal in the Nordics before moving on to Dropbox, and then to where he is today over at Templafy. Emil, great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Lee. Great to be here.
So first things first, I'd love to know, can you tell our audience a little bit more about your journeys to Templafy and really what your story is?
Yeah, I can try to keep it somewhat short. So after graduating from a master's in Copenhagen, Denmark, where I'm from Denmark, I got the opportunity to work at L'Oreal, which was definitely a great experience. But I would lie if I told that my passion lies in cosmetic or hair products. So I got the opportunity to join Dropbox in Dublin, Ireland, pretty early. In the sense from a B2B standpoint, it was obviously at that point in time, I think, early 15. It was a pretty significant B2C organization with high revenue numbers, but the B2B organization was still pretty early stage. So joined as the first person or one of the first persons in the Nordics to take care of that as an enterprise account executive to essentially go in and sell the business products that Dropbox offers to Nordic companies. So I had a good ride in Dropbox first, some years in Europe, and then following that moved to New York with Dropbox. And then the opportunity arose that I got the chance to, through some connections, to meet the founders of Templafy, and we had some chats, and then one thing led to another, and I decided after the Dropbox IPO that it was time for something new, and it was a perfect timing with Templafy wanting to open up a New York office, which was timely since I was in New York already. So and that is now close to 4.5 years ago that I joined Templafy. So I hope that was short enough. So
I love it, short and sweet, and it leads really nicely on actually to my next question, which obviously I think going into Templafy, I understand you started out as enterprise sales director? Is that correct? And so I'm interested to know what the go-to-market function looked like at that point in time, and then obviously, to where you are now, which is Chief Revenue Officer, what that journey has looked like.
Yeah, sure. So I think don't catch me on or hold me up on the exact number, but I think we were around like 30, 40 employees when I joined Templafy. Only had an office in Copenhagen. So New York was the first international office. And I was employee number one here in the US, tasked to set that up with everything that implied. So everything from actually finding an office to finding some employees, all of that. So it was, very scrappy, which was exactly what I was looking for when moving from Dropbox. So it was essentially starting again from scratch in North America and building an organization. They're on a great foundation, though. Great products. There were some good sellers out of Copenhagen who had already proven that we were able to sell this product to large enterprises. And then it was 2/3 of our addressable market is in North America, so it was very natural next step after raising our Series B that we would go to North America. So that was the time that I joined. And then, over the past 4.5 years, I've moved from managing a sales team and some SDRs to managing a bit more, and now in the role today, a global one, where I'm responsible for our sales efforts globally in terms of making sure that we find the right new customers, get them in, and that they are happy, and that we of course provide a lot of value to them.
You mentioned that when it first started, you're quite scrappy at the beginning, and love the thought of you, particularly with the office that you're sat in right now. I hope that was the first office that you moved into, right? I would love to know specifically what was it in those early days that really resonated, that really worked. You're in the sales team, you're being scrappy, and we're trying to get a foothold in this market. And I appreciate that's a fairly vague and broad question, but is there something where it was like, where you finally made your mark and it's like, yes, this we need to lean into, we need to do more of?
Yeah, so a few things, and a lot of it I can't take credit for, because that was done prior to me joining. But I think one of the things that we did really well, and that I recommend to all companies wanting to open up in a market abroad, is that we did a setup from Copenhagen where we did some thorough testing of the market itself, and we did that for two reasons. Obviously, to see, is that the direction that we should go? Should we open up in the US? But then also, to, when opening up in the US, ability to go in with full confidence that yes, this is working. So concretely, to get into the weeds of things, we got an SDR team. As a part of our SDR team, we switched them to working East Coast hours from Copenhagen, so they're working afternoon and evenings. The same with a few select AEs. And that allowed us to, of course, build pipeline, but also close deals. So we're very much monitoring, are we closing the deals within our ICP that we want to, which proved pretty quickly that we were able to, and also at the size, deal sizes that we wanted to, which gave full confidence in us. Okay, we can actually be successful here. And really that leads me to the second point, which I'm a big believer in, that going into a new market as a unknown company, which we were at that point, nobody in the US, or very, very few knew of Templafy back then, is that really it gave us the confidence to say, okay, we can go all in and do a big bet on it, because we have the confidence to do so. As opposed to, I see a lot of companies, let's open up a small office, hire a few people, see if it flies. But how are you going to do the root cause analysis of, well, if it's not working, did you hire the wrong people, or is it a market fit, or something third, where we had already squared away that we have the market fits, and that we had improved with people from Copenhagen, that we're able to sell the deals to the customers that we would like to, and was within our strategy. So it allowed us to go all in from the beginning, which provides some benefits. And with all in, a bit to the scrappy starts, I mean, we started in an office in Soho with where I got a couple of seats from some of my friends. So we did truly start scrappy in the first couple of months, but then we quickly moved into a nice office and got to a size where we hired 6 AEs, we hired SDRs, we moved over some people from Copenhagen as well. So we pretty quickly got to like a proper office size, which was very intentional. Of course, if customers were to visit us, they could see, okay, this is actually a legit enterprise company, but also that what people are buying into early days, when they don't know you as a company or a name, they buy into what they see. Of course, they can read online, but they walk into an office. Are they walking into something where there's a couple of people in the corner? Are they walking into something where, okay, this is good energy, it's a cool office, it seems like some really smart, engaged people? I want to be part of that. I want to be part of building that. So that is something that I think we did really, really well, and that I've seen other companies do the exact same with success. So that's definitely a big learning. So all the preparation going ahead, and of course, final thing, building pipeline before you open also allowed us to, that the sellers that we hired they didn't start from scratch. They actually had tangible pipeline they could start on from day one.
Well, you make it sound relatively straightforward when you put it like that. So I'm really intrigued to know then, because, I've spoken to guests before around, just even beyond the logistics of moving from selling in EMEA, for example, into the United States. Were there Is there, or perhaps was there one challenge that really stood out from going from selling in the Nordics, going from your bread and butter to selling to a North American market?
Yeah, I think from us and Christian and Henrik, our two founders, from day one, they set out to build a global company. So we had never targeted only let's start with Danish customers and then move to the Nordic ones and then move to Germany, etc. It was really let's target global customers from day one. So we had that advantage from the beginning. Of course, the customer base and the references, majority of them were in the Nordics. Some that we started to gain a good amount of traction in the rest of EMEA, but had few in the US that we really could leverage. Where still, when selling what we sell, which is we target large enterprises, it is, and I had the same thing when I moved over as an individual contributor from working out of Europe in Dropbox to the US. Okay, how much different is it selling here in the US? And that is also a question that I pretty often get. Where to be honest, I don't think it's that different. Of course, there are some decision-making processes and other things, and there are differences. But also, the United States is a massive country, and selling in New York is different than selling in LA, for example, as you would expect in Europe too. But really, it is in the end, it's people we're selling to. People want to be, when buying enterprise software, they want to buy value. They want to, get a consultative sell, and that's universal. And again, what they're really buying into in the end is a change. That's what you're selling in the end, and that's universal no matter where it is. And of course, then you adjust something to the culture or the industry or whatnot. But really, I don't believe that it's black and white of selling in Europe versus selling in the US.
Nice, I appreciate that. And as part of your journey, you've now moved up to Chief Revenue Officer of Templafy. So knowing what you know now, from the 4-year journey to get to where you are, if you could, take all of that knowledge and all of those learnings and go back in time, and let's say, for example, you started as a Chief Revenue Officer, what would you do differently?
Yeah, great questions. So a lot of things, of course. It's easy to look outside in and think that we did everything perfectly, where naturally we made a lot of mistakes on the way, as I think most companies do. Where I think what we would have benefited from back then. So we went out. We had few sellers at the point in time. So this was actually also the first time that we really were to go out and hire external sellers to the company. So we opened up in an entirely new market for the rest of the company. Obviously, I lived here already, but then we also added the first bunch of sellers externally. So what we did back then was that we deliberately hired. So we hired 6 AEs within the first month to open up the office, and again paired it with 2 AEs that we relocated from Europe. But we purposefully hired some different profiles in the beginning to see, okay, what is the type of profile that actually will be successful here at Templafy of both our culture but also selling our solution. Where of course, knowing now we are a lot sharper on what is the profile that is successful at Templafy and what are the characteristics, skills, etc., all the things that we're looking for. Well, that would have been nice to know back then, for sure. So I would say definitely highlight that. But then also on the flip side, and we were, I think, around like when we opened up 5 million AR, I think, where that's also pretty early stage. So if you get too locked in, then you also risk of course, missing some opportunities. And I think a good example that I like to highlight is if I was gun to my head, choose 5 industries, you're only allowed to sell to these 5 industries in North America, I would probably not have picked the healthcare as one of them based on what we've seen in Europe. But we, saw that over the period of time that healthcare is a very, very attractive industry for us here in North America, and we have a lot of customers. So allowing, obviously you need to have a strategy, a direction that you follow pretty religiously. But you also need to, especially in that stage, to leave some room for experimentation, to again allow for those external inputs. But to the point, there were things, especially on the people side, that if you just knew we hired the right people, from the get-go, then that would of course have made us get to where we wanted to be faster.
I'm really interested actually to pick up on that point, because you mentioned, there were certain characteristics that you found, really resonated. So I'm interested to know then, what were those characteristics, and it would be good to get a bit of insight into, I guess, what the cultural values are of Templafy as a whole. And I suppose I wonder whether the characteristics that you found of your sellers in North America were kind of the same as that, or whether it was values that complemented it.
Yeah. So I think, let's say the foundational characteristics have not changed. And I argue they should not change, no matter where you're selling. So at least what I have observed also in my career, and all the best sellers that I've been surrounded have, share a lot of things in common in terms of traits. Where to answer your question, it's also that you need a different profile when you are at 5 million and you have traction, but you're still building something out. You have fewer processes. You have a less defined market. Fewer people know you than when you're at 100 million in AR and need to scale. So I think it's just being cognizant of what type of people do you need at what point in time, and again, that you don't hire a very experienced seller who is really good at running in one direction too early. I see that mistake done a lot. And then of course also the flip side of somebody who likes the experimentation, likes to figure things out, where a lot of things are figured out at 100 million, hopefully. So it is more that, okay, if this is what we want you to do, of course we still need to improve, be better. So if you spot something that we should improve, please raise your hand. But the role is and the role is more defined at that point in time. So that is just depending on where you are stage wise, for sure.
So with all that in mind, I'm keen to pull us in a slightly different direction, actually pull us a little bit out of Templafy. So what would you say from your perspective then, knowing what you know now, what would you say is the single most important factor necessary to building a high-performing, scaling, go-to-market team?
Well, I mean, the single most important is, sorry to go back again, is naturally the people. That's the foundation of anything. So, of course, having the right people on board at the right points in time as well. So also just acknowledging that there are, different people or different profiles work really well at different stages. And of course, some are highly talented. They can work across all stages and enjoy that and enjoy the evolution. And some are more, they prefer the early stage, or they prefer when something is more built out. There's more processes, etc., in place. So just being cognizant of that. So people is the foundation. Where I'm not sure that was answering your exact question, or maybe it was, Lee.
No, absolutely, it absolutely does. And I think I'm intrigued to know then, with if we're talking high performing teams and it's scale up mode, going from where you were to where you have got to, could you give, and obviously with your role now in terms of CRO across all different teams, what are those? Is there perhaps a common thread across each of them that you're really looking for when you're trying to hire people at different stages? I guess what I'm trying to get to is, how do you know? Because with our listeners, they'll be each be at different stages. There'll be a early stage growth mode, which is where we're Ebster at, and there'll be others who are enterprise sellers. And I guess what I'm trying to get to is there a specific kind of value or trait that you're looking for at different stages as you've gone on your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we were to look at some core, traits or characteristics that never changes no matter stage, I would say the number one thing I look for is curiosity. It brings a lot of positives to you. You're curious about the product that you're selling. You're curious about the competition. You're curious about your markets. You're typically also curious about your colleagues, which is very important when building a company is also building a culture. So curiosity, and then I'll say if I am to select two more, then for me it's around the team. So again, that of course, I'm competitive myself. I like to win. I like to be surrounded by people who like to win too, but not on the expense of the person next to them. Of course, AEs, you want to be number one globally. That's great. But if they can be number one and lift everybody else around them 20% at the same time, that is really where I assume, okay, that is an A plus player versus an A or a B player when they manage to do that. So curiosity, the team component, and then lastly, we are in sales. It is hard work, and if you assuming that you do the right thing, more input is going to lead to more output. So the people putting in the additional hours or the additional work, it does matter, and it will yield results. And then I did mention three things, and then one thing that is let's say a bit more easy to look for is the what is your approach to sales? I know we go a bit into the AE SDR route of are you more magicians or are you more science? Is selling for you science or is it art? Where you can scale the magicians, you can scale the art. You need them in the beginning. You need somebody to go out and evangelize your products, and some people just have a natural fit for it, and they will continue to be successful, or can continue to be successful even when you scale the company to become a lot bigger. But for you to truly go in and scale, you need to get something down on recipe and formula, which is where it needs to go from the art to science. So that's of course also the journey that we have been on for the past 4.5 years, is going from a lot of co-founder-led sales to then a couple of really talented individuals carrying a lot of the revenue to then 5 to then 10, etc. And then saying, what are these individuals doing right? Let's get that on a formula, so to speak, and then hire people in with the right traits who are excited about it and can teach that or get that formula. So again, we can scale this predictably. So that is again, for all companies, what you're looking for, because the magicians, they are hard to find. So and they have a limit to how much, how many you can find.
I love that. And you touched on a point that I'm really interested to know a little bit more around, so once you found your magicians, then you need your scientists. I think great analogy. So from your experience then over those 4 years, of those, the scientists, let's say, was there perhaps one process or structure that you implemented that galvanized them, helped you on that journey to predictable revenue that was a real game changer for you?
Yeah. So we were asked by one of our investors to come. What is that? 4-6 weeks ago to come and present on this topic for their portfolio companies on. Because we have been pretty predictable in terms of delivering what we told throughout the period that I've been here and also prior to that. So we built in I think also pretty early some really good structure around our sales process to follow, and that's of course both from a very basic Salesforce setup, but then actually also what we were doing in the different stages from a tactical perspective. Where we could have improved is also evolve that setup over time a bit faster than we had. So we have done. It's been a big focus for us the past year of revamping, or not revamping, but let's say improving and getting our setup and our processes to the next level in terms of how we actually sell and again how we can scale to the next phase that we're going into in our growth stage.
Nice. Any examples that you can share of perhaps one thing you're particularly proud of that went into that?
Top of mind right now is so I think one really important thing is the ICP focus, so ideal customer profile. I think a lot of companies probably, as they should early on, it's about, okay, let's get some revenue in, focus on the top line so we can grow the company, show traction, and raise our next funding round or whatever it is. And then when do you switch from that to again getting revenue in? That's nice, but for a company like ours, it's about getting the right customers in. It takes the same amount of time to onboard and get a very large enterprise live as it does for a mid-market customer for us, where naturally we are a modular platform, meaning that we typically gain majority of our revenue after we sign on a customer. So getting the right customers in are extremely crucial for us because we've used a lot of resources to make sure that our customers are successful afterwards. Which turns we have really, really good numbers in terms of churn, in terms of NR, which is, of course, testament to our products, but also the efforts that we put in and the time and resources we invest in our customers getting on board. But if we get the wrong customers in the door, who are too small with, let's say, not enough potential for us, then they're going to be a deficit, whereas if we get the right ones in. So I'd say really that we have gotten really, really sharp and really continue to improve quarter over quarter our ability to get the right ICP customers in, which is crucial, of course, for we are more relevant for them. So the propensity to buy upfront is higher. That's good. But when we look at total customer lifetime value over a period of 5 to 10 years, that's really where it starts to kick in, that we get the right customers in. So I'd say definitely that. And then also we have done a lot on our approach to go from an inside out perspective in terms of going in and pitching again from the Templafy narrative to actually switching that around and outside in, which is it's a tough exercise, right? But going to that outside in, saying what are the problems, what are the pains for our buyers, whether Templafy existed or not. And then how do we attach ourselves to them? How do we position that we're going to help our customers solve those with our technology? Which is, that's transformation. It's different. And I think obviously one that most companies need to go through. Some of companies do that really well from early on, and then from us we've done that pivot, not a pivot, but at least evolution. So again, I guess the classic is going from feature function, right, to value, and again the outside in perspective. So we've done great strides on that this year, which we shows across all our metrics in terms of our deal sizes, our sales cycle length, the average revenue we get per user, and so forth. That we're seeing that kicking in.
Amazing. And one that that you didn't necessarily touch on that I am really intrigued to go into, because we were talking about it pre-show, is the role of content in actually helping to drive that revenue. I know it's exactly what Templafy does, but what I'm really interested to understand is how you're using that in-house. So to use a cliche, like sipping your own champagne. So I'm really interested to know how you're using it yourselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So maybe, and this is not to lead to avoid answering a question with some high level one, but I think
it does require some context, I think, beforehand of what you guys do.
Some context, and again, it's fine. We can talk about Templafy, what we do, our solution, where really it's from that aspect. I think it's crucial and important and often ignored part of all this stuff we talked about so far around people. Of course, they're the foundation, but then there's these things where, at least what we've seen, and we recently published a Content is Everything report where there were some really interesting stats from more than 2,000 people surveyed around the amount of time that people spend on creating documents and content. And of course, being in sales, this is essentially, you're not going to get a deal without having presented something to the customer and getting a document signed in the end. Right. So there are documents involved, but at least we see a lot, not necessarily front and center of a lot of companies' thought process. And if we take some of the basic stats, is that on average a proposal, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I'm trying to cite our numbers here, but I think it's around 24 hours on average that it takes to produce a proposal, and of course that varies. Whether are you selling some more simplistic, more transactional down markets S&P solution, hopefully doesn't take 24 hours. But are you selling something complex RFPs for selling a vessel to a shipping or shipping company? There's a lot of bolts and nuts in a ship, right? So that takes more than 24 hours probably to put a proposal together with all the specifications, all the data that needs to go in. So this is, again, that's on average. But really, the point here being that people are spending a lot of time on creating content, and typically the content is not the purpose, it's the outcome of that content. What is the outcome that we drive by using that content? So really, if you were to distill down, what is Templafy and what do we do? Well, we are on on a mission to take the manual work out of producing your documents, so you can actually focus on what matters, which is the meeting that you're going to. Instead of having to spend 90% of your time on preparing for it with putting your presentation together, your contracts and whatnot, what if we could remove that 90% or reduce it to 10% so you can actually focus on, okay, let me go in and smash that meeting and get the outcome that I wanted or deliver the value to the customer that I wanted. So that's really distilled down what we do. And that's still very fluffy. So what we are is we're a document generation platform. So we help people create their documents, and that is no matter where you create them from. So we are agnostic to the starting point of, are you creating something from Salesforce? Are you creating something from in the office or the G Suites? Are you starting from a different system? We will meet the user where they are. And really to also to get to to your question of what do we do internally. If we take a classic case of, I as a rep, I need to go and present to a customer, we might have the first meeting. Then, okay, let me bring the first call deck or the first meeting deck to that customer. I can just go, which I think most people do in most organizations. At least we see, okay, let me just take the old one I've saved on my desktop. I'll just update it with the company name, making sure that the date is right, and just control find or command find to find that I'm not mentioning the customer that I visited last week in this proposal. Looks pretty unprofessional, and then good, I'm ready to go. And that is also how I used to work personally, because that was the fastest. Where of course it opens up for a really suboptimal experience for both the customers, but also the impact that you can have as a rep there. Because are you necessarily presenting what is exactly the highest impactful content to that customers?
What I would love to know is,
yes,
when you use it in house. Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing there was a point when you probably weren't using it, maybe in the early stage of the business, and feel free to correct me if I'm completely wrong. But when you started using it, what was the impact on, revenue? What was the impact on the bottom line at the end of actually starting to use it?
Yeah, we've been using it from day one, and of course the product has evolved and gotten a lot better than what it was back in 2015 when we launched. But again, not to go into the figures, but our study shows that 84% of people are using incorrect or outdated information when created documents. With us, of course, things can happen, errors can happen, and people can. It's not that we don't force people to, you can reuse old content if you want to. It's just typically slower, where that figure is obviously very low to zero with us. So I think some of those, there's a risk component. And then again, the impactful content. There's a reason why you have such big product marketing teams and customer and marketing teams in general in enterprises, is that they sit and produce content that they know will drive, typically based on data, that they know will drive revenue for you. But a lot of cases, a lot of times, that content sits in a repository somewhere that you have to go and find it. You don't necessarily do that, right? And then it's produced, but it's not having the impact. And that is directly impacting the top line. And then, of course, the massive amount of time wasted. I mentioned that 24 hours on average for producing a proposal. But I think the figures is around overall, I don't recall the exact numbers, but it's really, really large numbers in regards to how much time, and just think about yourself, how much time do you actually spend on a weekly basis producing a document? I think it's around 15 hours where you actually literally sit and type things. And of course, an analyst at a bank, that's significantly more than 15 hours. If we can just eliminate that or reduce that by 30%, 50%, 80%, then we're starting to talk really big numbers on the bottom line, because those resources that time can be redeployed to revenue generating activities in our field in sales. They can get on one more customer call or two more customers call, or they can do more prospecting or whatnot. So one thing is us eliminating that time or reducing it, but really it is what can they repurpose that time to is where we start to see significant impact. Yeah.
Absolutely, and we'll be sure to leave a link in the show notes where you can get all of the data and insights that Emil's been mentioning through that. Last question. I would love to know, what is the one book that you'd recommend to other revenue leaders?
Yeah, well, it's impossible to get around that. The Qualified Sales Leader by John McMahon. It's read and it's a great book. So yeah, that's a must read.
Amazing. Why?
I think it's first of all, it's well written. I think you can identify with the opening scenes around spending time at a QBR that is wasteful. I think all sellers or managers or leaders have been in that. So it is okay. He knows what he's talking about. Obviously, his record shows, but I like the way that it's engaging the book, and then there's some very, very concrete takeaways that you can take and implement in your organization today. So those are the two main reasons. And maybe I'm wrong. For me, it's a page turner, and I read it probably too many times. But yeah. So those are the two main takeaways, or two reasons. Sorry.
Awesome, and we'll put that in the show notes as well. And therefore, as such, Emil, it's been great to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing insights into Templafy and into your world. If our audience wants to learn a little bit more about what you guys are doing and follow what you're working on, I saw you posting your lovely walk to work in New York the other week. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so they can find me either on Brooklyn Bridge on the way to our office in One World Trade, but if that's more of coincidence, so they can find me on LinkedIn, and of course, also more than happy for people to reach out to me directly. And if you're interested in what we do for customers concretely, then we have a great sales team that people can reach out to too. So
smooth, I like that.
Yeah.
Emil, thank you so much again. It's been great to have you on, and thank you to everyone that's been listening to this week's episode. We'll catch you next week.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Insights. If you want to learn more, subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll deliver every episode straight to your inbox. If you have any questions, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. Our links will be in the episode notes. See you next week.